They always have a surplus, and the surplus, since I've been a member of the co-op, which about 22 years, I receive a check every year, which are proceeds to all the members from their profits. They put out a great magazine. They always have free classes, everything from hunter safety to cleaning the streams. And I see it as an organization that has thrived on the basis of a co-op. I'm sure there's bad examples that haven't worked, but you mentioned the banks and the credit unions. I use a bank for my business, and I'll be the first one to admit they claim they have 5-star customer service, but I think their customer service sucks. When I've had problems or I needed something solved, they just kind of smiled and said, "Well, that's just how it is, Mad Dog."
Yeah, exactly. I was looking to try to find an example of our co-op, Quiver River. It's a wonderful co-op, electric co-op. I was looking for the rates because we were in California.
Per kilowatt hour.
Yeah, my buddy Dave, his electricity out there, he has Southern California Edison. We have Quiver River Electric. He pays something like 29 cents a kilowatt hour for his electricity. We pay 12. His house is much smaller than mine. His kilowatt hour usage was about the same as ours 1 month. Our electric bill was $85.
Probably in the dead of winter.
No, this was just a month or so ago.
Okay.
Ours was $85. His was $170. 85, okay. 170. Twice as much for the same size house. But the co-op, our electricity is cheap. Now, granted, we have coal. They don't. We have hydro. We have nuclear. That's where we get most of our power from, coal, hydro, and nuclear, which are 3 cheap ways to get electricity. They have wind and solar, and they buy it from Oregon, so it's expensive. But co-ops are a wonderful way. Like you said, the farmers have used it for years to put all their. If you sell a lot of wheat, you get a good price. Mm-hmm. But one guy doesn't have a lot of wheat. 10 do. They can up their price.
One of the things that was interesting, and this goes back at least 1990, if not a little before, when people were worried about the health care in this country. And obviously, at the moment, we have mostly a capitalist system that, a for-profit health system. Mm-hmm. And the politicians at this moment are all saying, well, we really need Medicare for all. We need something like the VA. We need about whatever. Back then, he was a senator, Bob Kerrey from Nebraska. Mm-hmm. And he came out of basically the farmers co-op, the rural electric co-op. And he says, why can't we have health care that's a co-op? And they left him back to Nebraska.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, that would be, you have to make a profit. You have to pay people. There's no free lunch. But if you're going to have a kid, you can't stop having a kid. And, you're going to need some help to help pay for the services. Well, maybe down the road when the kid's often grown and you've got no health issues and, then you can, contribute to where it's a share and share alike situation. And it still boggles my mind that nobody even thought that could work since it's systems like that have worked in this country for 75 years.
I think in many places, many systems, we don't have that trust. We're afraid somebody's going to get one over on us. And not only that, but there's so much money involved in healthcare. Because if you remember when the Affordable Care Act was trying to get started, Obamacare, whatever you want to call it, it was not happening. There was nothing that Obama could do to get it going because the insurance lobby was 100% against it. And they were so strong that they weren't going to budge because they had the politicians in their pocket, the Democrats as well as the Republicans. And then one minor thing changed with the Affordable Care Act. Okay, we're going to include the insurance companies. In fact, it's not really health insurance. It's you've got to buy the medical insurance. Okay, so it's you got to buy insurance, and we'll go ahead and subsidize your insurance.
That's right. They mandated the insurance, so automatically the
healthcare.
insurance companies were all in.
And the insurance company said, "Well, wait a minute. You mean everybody in the country
has to buy
something from us?
We're in.
We're all in."
Yeah.
And that it's always the money. Well, what do I always say?
Follow the money.
Follow the money 100% of the time.
Yeah.
Well, here's something that's kind of interesting, and I lived this, so it's an anecdote. I don't have a footnote for it other than I was there in the early 1990s when Miss Hillary Clinton was trying to do health care.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? At that point in time, I worked for Sherwood Medical, which is now no longer exists. It was subsumed under Tyco until Dennis Kozlowski went to jail for other things. Mm. But anyway, so I am working for one of the pharmaceutical wings of American Home Products, and their point is to furnish healthcare items and to make money, right?
Okay.
I was in the in-house print shop at the headquarters downtown, and we did much of the printing for the entire company. However, I actually got called into the office one day by my superior. There were like 6 of us in the print shop, and he says, "I need some help with this letter, this report." And I said, "Why?" And he says, "Well, we've been printing stuff, and we charge it out to the various departments, and then, we have to balance that against the supplies and our insurance and our salaries and whatever." He said, "We made too much money last year. He says, "I'm supposed to break even totally, absolutely down to the penny." And I said, "Well, I can't help you with that." But the idea was kind of funny to me, as we were supposed to be running on a break even as an internal part of a for-profit capitalistic company.
But your division was not to make money.
Right. We were not to make money.
What was the reason behind that?
And I never found out. Basically, the fellow who was my boss had run a small print shop, and he knew a lot of tricks of the trade, to get better deals on paper, to, buy ink at this time of the year or whatever, and, to get the best bang for his buck. And he did it. And we came out so far in the black, he had to figure out how to make it look like we weren't saving the company money.
Well, see, you missed your opportunity, Joe. You could have said, "Boss, I got a perfect solution for you. Give it to me and my 6 buddies in the form of one-time only bonuses. That way you'll break even, and if it happens again, we'll bail you out next year too."
But it's kind of funny because at the same time that this was happening, we were being pressured. "Oh, well, you need to go out there and, talk down all of this stuff about the Clinton healthcare stuff because, we're gonna die. We're gonna go in the hole, and the whole company is going to just internally collapse."
And they made too much money.
And internally, we were doing he wasn't doing it necessarily on purpose. It's just when he, toted up all the figures at the end of the year, that's what it came out.
Well, there's a lot of people, and I will say that I am not against Medicare for all, but what I will tell somebody is, okay, let's talk about it. How are we going to pay for it? And if you show me how you're going to pay for it, I'll listen to you. But until you tell me how I'm going to pay for it, I don't want to hear you. And you can't just say, "Well, we're going to have the millionaires pay for it." Maybe they don't want to. Okay. I mean, Bill Gates, who is a very left-wing guy, Democratic supporter, just about filled the commode when he thought that, well, wait a minute, Elizabeth Warren might be elected president. Do you know how much of my money she's going to take? I mean, I'll write a big check to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation every year, but it's going to be the check that I want to write, not the check that I'm told to write.
Yeah, he came out publicly and said, well, if Elizabeth Warren ends up being the Democratic nominee, I'll have to vote for Trump.
Did he say that?
He said it this morning. In fact, my buddy in Washington State sent me a copy of that news brief that he had.
Really? Mm-hmm. Really?
There you have it.
And you see, that's the answer to that question. How are you going to pay for it?
Yeah.
If you're running this thing as a co-op, the people who are the members who are benefiting are the people who are also paying.
Yeah. Well, and with the co-op, I mean, compared to my buddy California Dave, not only was my electric bill less than half of his, at the end of every year, they write us a check. If they're in the black, we get a check because they don't make money.
And they have been every year since I've been a member. And you've been a member longer than I have.
I've been a member for 30 years. That's how long we've lived out here. And every year we get a check. No questions asked. Sometimes it's $50, sometimes it's $400. It just depends.
Yeah.
It just depends. But we always get a check because they always make money, and they don't put it in the bank. They don't buy a yacht with it. They give it back to the shareholders.
Yeah, every quarter I get interest on the money I have in my credit union account.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and basically that's the dividend share back to the people whose money they're using to make more money. Same
as a dividend for a stock. Just exactly right. It's the same principle because you're part of the owners. You're one of the owners. You're a stockholder for all intents and purposes.
Right, and that's the reason I think that sort of a system would work better than, or I would like it better than say I pay this, somebody else gets the dividend.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because you can't possibly take stock in every medical and insurance company out there. I mean, it just wouldn't be reasonable.
Well, getting back to communism and socialism, and it would be a good system that would work very well if people would just do the right thing. But there's not enough people to do the right thing enough of the time to make it really work, because you're going to get those greedy SOBs that are just going to say, you know, I'm just going to take my fair share and then some. And if he does, she does. If she does, they do. And then pretty soon it all falls apart. In theory, it would work, but it just can't. And again, going back to the Oxford definition, a political theory derived from Karl Marx, advocating class warfare, the bourgeois and the proletariat. That's the whole thing. You hate him because they have more than you.
Well, that's one of the giant spears that the Democratic Party throws on a regular basis is class warfare. They use that as a platform and as talking points to garner votes.
Well, they all do. The Republicans do the same thing. I mean, if you vote for the Democratic Party, we're going to go ahead and start raising the hammer and sickle above the White House. If you vote for the Republican Party, then you know what? They're going to go ahead and throw starving babies into the street and run over them with their Cadillacs. Right. I mean, it's just hyperbole after hyperbole. None of it's going to happen, but it's all the scare tactics. Yeah. It's the whole class warfare. It's the bourgeois versus the proletariat.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and there are things like this, though, that work on a relatively small scale that will never work on a big scale. I mean, this is any sufficiently large bureaucracy, whether it's, you know, any system is going to be corrupt.
Sure.
And that's the hang up if you want a big system.
So your example might be one of the Scandinavian countries. They're socialist.
Perfect example.
They're a socialist country. But, however, it's a small operation, so it actually works. But as it expands, it doesn't work because you have a larger amount of the general population that are the takers, and everyone, it doesn't equal out between the givers and the takers. It supersedes its desire.
Well, but it's like Joe said, the more people you have, the more difficult it is. You mentioned Scandinavian countries, the country of Norway. There's 5.3 million people in the whole country. The country, okay? Are there that many people in Missouri?
Yes.
There's 7 million in Missouri.
There you go.
We're bigger than Norway.
There you go. We're bigger than Norway. And you got to remember, in Norway, up until very recently, I mean, I think there were like 6 families in Norway. That's an exaggeration, of course. But basically, it's a very homogeneous society where everybody acts the same, speaks the same language. This country, 360 million people, and I think we have about 359 million different types of people, okay? We're a true melting pot. We have different societies, different customs, different religions, different everything. And whenever you have something that's different, there's a person that, if this person is different from that person, you're always going to have a degree of mistrust, because you know what?